Hey guys, this is Miss Arlequin, and in this lesson, we are going to talk about the way that setting can interact and affect the other elements of a narrative. All right, so when you're talking about setting, you're talking about where and when the story takes place. So if we think about the time period, would you expect a story that's set in the year 400 to be the same as a story that's set in the year 3400? Think about how these two narratives might be different from each other. All right, so once again, though, when we're talking about setting, setting can be the location, it could be where the story is taking place. It could also be the when, the time period that a story takes place in, or the time of day, the time of year. But setting can also include some deeper elements like environmental factors, both natural, so it can take into consideration even things such as weather, and also societal, so the type of society, the culture, the form of government that that particular setting is being ruled under. All of those things can impact where and when a story is taking place. Now, in real life, the setting is the time and place in which we live. And the plot is what happens in our lives. It is our story, the events that occur. All right, so today our focus is on the way that different story elements can influence each other, and we're going to look at it through the lens of setting. Setting can have a big impact on a story. The setting of a story can influence the way the characters feel, the way the characters behave. It can also be used to reveal parts of the character, parts of their personality, and the type of person that they are. Setting can influence what the characters say to each other, so the dialogue. It can influence the plot events, so the conflict can be influenced by the setting, or just events that occur leading up to the conflict, or the way that the characters are going to resolve the conflict might be influenced by the setting. And then, of course, all of these elements can together work to develop the theme of the story. So the setting can influence what the exact theme is. All right, so now one interaction that can occur between the setting is the setting and the characters. Characters can be affected by the setting that they're in. This means that the character may act differently in different locations. Now, for example, I'm going to use myself as the example. I'm usually confident when I'm at school because I'm familiar with the school building and working here. But if I were to have to go to a new school and teach a class that are not my regular students, I would be really nervous and unsure of myself because I wasn't familiar with that setting. I wouldn't know where things are located. I might not know how to use their smartboard if it's a different smartboard than the one that I'm used to. So the change of setting affects the way that I'm going to behave and the way that I feel. Now, when we read scary Halloween stories that start with a dark and spooky night, often the characters are scared or frightened because of the setting that they're in. If you take those same characters and put them in a bright sunny day at a carnival, there's really no reason for them to be scared or frightened. Now, that can change based on plot events, but the setting in this particular instance is not adding to their fright. When a character is happy and they're in a place that they love, they're one person. But then when the character goes to a place that's stressful or causes them frustration, that character becomes a different individual in their thoughts and actions. So I'm going to use The Hunger Games as an example. Katniss Everdeen, the narrator and the main character, embodies this idea. When she's in the woods hunting with Gale, who is her closest friend, she's able to smile, to feel free. She's in a place that she's comfortable and that she loves. But when she's home, she's stressed out about taking care of her mom and her sister and everything that goes into running a household. So again, same character, different locations. She feels different. She behaves differently. Now, setting can also affect the events that occur in a story. In other words, the plot. For example, in the poem The Highwayman, the setting in stanza 4 specifically enables Tim, who is this crazy, ugly character who works for the young lady Bess's father. At the end, he takes care of the horses. He's in love with Bess. He's able to eavesdrop on Bess and the Highwayman because of the setting. The setting in this case is a dark old inn yard. Because it's dark, the Highwayman and Bess aren't able to see him. If we were to change that setting to the opposite, make it the bright sunny day, he would not be able to eavesdrop. Because he is able to eavesdrop in the dark, this leads to the main conflict of the poem. He is then able to take the information that he hears and go to the soldiers, the redcoats, and tell them about the highwaymen. The soldiers then come to the inn, they tie Bess up, they're trying to use her as bait. This leads to the eventual death of both Bess and the highwaymen. And it all started because the setting enabled Tim to eavesdrop. So this is the inciting incident to everything else that happens in the plot. Another example comes from the story on the Sidewalk Bleeding. Now, in this story, we can see that setting has a big impact on the plot. The story focuses on a kid named Andy. He's the member of a gang called the Royals. At the beginning of the story, he's at a party. He leaves the party to get a pack of cigarettes. He decides to take a shortcut through an alleyway. As he's going through that alleyway, members of a rival gang sneak up on him and they end up getting into a fight. They take a knife and they stab him. Now, the setting is vital here. If he had not gone into this isolated alley, then they wouldn't have been able to catch him off guard and they wouldn't have been able to stab him, which eventually leads to his death at the end of the story. So if he had just gone like the regular way where there were crowded people, or if he'd never left the party, if he was still at the party, which I'm sure was full of his fellow gang members, these rival gang members would not have been able to attack him. So this is a really big part of this story, the setting. In general, just remember that when you are looking to see how the setting is impacting the characters or impacting the plot, always try to use the what if strategy. The what if strategy is this really great thought process where you think about what if this hadn't happened, or what if we changed this part of the story. In this case, we're talking about setting. So what if we changed the setting? What if it wasn't in a dark alley? What if it was the opposite? What if it wasn't in a dark old inn yard? What would be the opposite? Bright sunny day? How does that change what happens? What if it wasn't in an alley? What if it was in a crowded street? How would that change what happens? And by using that thought process, you'll be able to analyze the impact setting has. And this should also, if you're writing about this topic, this should also be part of your explanation sentences. Once you give your evidence and you're explaining how the setting is impacting the characters or how it's impacting the plot, make sure you talk a little bit about what if. What if you changed it? How would it all be different?